From the beautifully landscaped Jubilee Garden here on a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Bridgetown, Barbados, I'm Sherwood McCaskie welcoming you to Trees, the Silent Sentinels. As always, I'm pleased that you have chosen to spend the next 30 minutes with my guest. In last week's program, we looked at the impact of infrastructural development on the treescape of Barbados. This week, we are looking at the benefits of having trees on our properties and all across the island. We begin with Dr. Claire Durant.
The aesthetic value of trees is very important. Many people are afraid to put trees because they say, oh, it's going to affect the buildings. But there are trees, the same way you have horses for courses, you have trees that will be able to grow, small trees that will be able to grow in these areas, and there will be a benefit to the people who are living there to use these trees for their recreation, and it makes the place look more beautiful. We might not recognize it here, but studies have been done which says looking at green spaces, trees and leaves and plants, it actually has a relaxing effect on you. All of these things are important. When you look at what you would say a housing area or area that has just been built in 1 year, and then you follow it and people do not plant trees, you always say, oh, it looks so barren. Compare that to places where you go and you see beautiful houses with lots of trees. You say, oh, that place looks much nicer. The aesthetic value of property is improved by having trees. The value of houses are improved by having mature trees, because if you look at any of the advertisements you would see that people would mention specifically mature trees or mature orchard or mature plantings, so that anybody who is moving into that house or is considering buying that house is going to say, oh, this place is going to be lovely, it's going to be really cool, I'm really going to enjoy being in that space. And you for yourself, you think about it. If you just had a mansion and it was so beautiful, but it was just there and it was cemented all around, and then you had another mansion and it had all these beautiful trees around, so that you want to have a party and you want to have a barbecue in your back garden, your friends say, I want to be outside. Other than that, everybody wants to be inside in the air conditioning because it's too hot and it's really unpleasant. Next time you are driving, think about it as you look at the neighborhoods. As you drive along the West Coast and you pass Sandy Lane and you go down and you look at Royal Westmoreland, are you able to see the houses? What you see are beautiful plantings screening people's porches and areas from your view, and they are behind there enjoying themselves. And you can have that too. We are not saying that you need to put a mahogany tree or bearded fig tree in your yard. What we are saying is that the National Conservation Commission has all types of trees, big trees and small trees, and I am sure that they can offer good advice to you of what tree would fit in your space that could grow, and you will be able to look after it and it will be able to benefit you. Even if you want to say as simple as having a lime tree in your yard. If you have those, then those will be a benefit to you and they will still make your place look lovely. So we have to make the point of making choices when it comes to trees, and good choices, so that you can incorporate them into your daily life and activity for you, and remember your children too.
The importance of incorporating trees on our properties has been part of the Barbadian tradition. However, along the way we seem to have lost this as we moved into the so-called development. Carla Daniel embellishes this by looking at the traditional Bajan property.
When I'm looking across the landscape, whether it be a field, you see sugarcane, you see sweet potatoes, yams, you always know where the plantation house either is or was, because you see that small oasis in the middle of the fields where you have mahogany trees, you may have cabbage palm trees and they're just sticking up high. And you can say, oh, look, the house is there. Because they knew the value of the trees. And you can show countless properties. Any property that is, the house could be worth 2 million American dollars, 2 million US. And it's just sitting there on bare dirt or in a sea of cement. You do not see the value. You don't connect that image in your mind with something that is very valuable. You go and you see a house, a low chattel house that might be worth $20,000, but this person got this thing landscaped to the ground. You have green trees all around it. You have flower beds planted. They have a nice lined up kitchen garden at the side, right by the side door. You pass and you say, whoa, this thing looks amazing. And it's not the value of the building, it's the value of the aesthetic. And that is exactly what plants do. They enhance it. Now, I am not going to mislead you. There is no magic thing that says, oh, I'm going to purchase some seedlings, I'm going to put them in the ground, and voila, I'm going to have an amazing tree and it's going to look brilliant, and I can put a tire swing in it and I can throw in a tree house. No. Like everything else that's living, like your goldfish, your dog, and your cat, trees need both care and attention. And you need to pay special attention to them to maintain their health. So you need to make sure the tree is pruned, and there are quite a few places that you can have a professional come and do some pruning, or you can do some research yourself and learn, how to prune your tree. But not just that.
Just be careful about which trees you plant, know what you want, because when you plant larger trees, they help to create a microenvironment. For you, it's just a matter of sitting out in the shade of a neem tree and enjoying the cool in the middle of the day. But if you're going to have garden crops, the tree you plant can also benefit whatever garden crops you want to plant. In some places, persons will plant neem all around the house. That will keep away the mosquitoes. It will also keep away a lot of other insects. Because even when the neem leaves drop on the ground, they actually continue to perform some anti-insecticidal activity in the soil.
So you really need to do some research. You either can do it on your own and find out what's the best type of tree for the amount of land that you have available and how close you can put the tree to your house. So you really need to look at the size at maturity, the type of roof system it has, how strong it is, because there's some trees that really just aren't very strong and you don't want to put them close to property. And then the other types, whether it's going to have lots of leaves falling. There's some trees that will still lose their leaves in the dry season, and then you or your gardener or your children, whoever you can get to clean it, will have that work to do. But there are other trees that don't have those leaves falling, that maintain their foliage, where you wouldn't have that work to do. So it really depends. When you're about to plant a tree, you need to consider all of these areas so that you are aware of what you're planting and what the results will be.
Speaking about results, Barney Gibbs introduces an interesting observation to the mix. He calls attention to one of the more affluent neighborhoods in Barbados, a neighborhood where, wisely enough, trees are allowed to stand as the residents' silent sentinels and, of course, add great value to their properties.
When you drive through along Highway 1, through the Sandy Lane area, where the trees are actually, the canopy actually completely covers the road, the temperature actually drops a degree or two. And I was reflecting on why that was allowed to happen there and nowhere else, but I think a factor is the fact that there are no overhead power lines in that area. And I look forward to a day, maybe in the not too distant future, where there will be no overhead power lines. Maybe if cellular technology and photovoltaics get to the point where overhead lines would be a thing of the past, and we're looking at old photos and say, how is it that our eyes became so desensitized to all these cables running everywhere? But it obviously has a very, very serious impact on the tree cover, because one of the biggest, trimming of trees occurs by light and power and other agencies who are trying to keep the branches out of the wires. But that doesn't obtain in Sandy Lane, and you can see the difference.
Trees are truly important for making us feel good about where we are. If you looked around here at Gun Hill and imagine not a single tree here, this site would have little interest. The trees add significantly to it. They keep it cool, they provide shade, and Typically, when you landscape a newly built property and you selectively place trees, you increase the resale value of that property over time.
It's important not only for the aesthetic value and having gardens, but it also affects how you feel. And trees allow you to use the outdoor spaces of your homes as well. We know we have areas like Sandy Lane and Royal Westmoreland where high net worth individuals come and they use these spaces and they enjoy the outdoors, they enjoy the weather. What is happening in these areas with regard to the gardens and plantings can also be reflected in the areas that we have like Haynesville and Ferniehearst, because what we can do is we can also plant trees and get Barbadians to appreciate trees more. If you have trees outside, you can use the outside in the daytime, you can sit under them, you can use your hammock, as opposed to being inside, having the windows closed and using the air condition. The trees cool the area, they make it more pleasant and refreshing, and then you can be outside and enjoy the fresh air. So we mustn't think of trees as trees are only for a particular type of individual or only for a particular type of class. Trees are for everyone, but we have to make that effort in order to incorporate them into our lives by planting them and then also looking after them and being more understanding of trees. And yes, they have leaves and they need a little bit of cleaning and pruning, but they are benefit to everyone in Barbados. And we need more people to agitate to say, I love trees and why can't I have a tree in my area?
For that reason, this program was produced to sensitize Barbadians on the importance of trees and incorporating them on our spaces. Hopefully, we would move beyond the point of mere admiration of what we see in places like Sandy Lane and other communities in Barbados and further afield.
Barbadians are well traveled, and we go to all these beautiful places. We've been to Park Lane and we see those beautiful trees lining the street. You go to Buckingham Palace and there are beautiful trees lining the road that goes up to Buckingham Palace, and we love it. We say these trees are beautiful, they're in flower, we take pictures.
We see these beautiful avenues, wonderful parks in the great cities that we visit from time to time, whether they're in North America or in Europe. And we come back full of admiration for these places. Benches under trees in parks, the wonderful lawns, and yet somehow we don't want those things to happen here. We don't have that same concern. We won't transfer that inspiration to this localized situation. It's a very interesting thing that what is good when we visit, what is good when we go to a foreign country, we don't then replicate here in many of our public spaces. And that is why you find places looking a little unruly and unkempt, whereas overseas, one of the prides of every city is to have these parks, boulevards, and decorative botanical areas.
When I went to Argentina about 3 years ago, I was just absolutely blown away by where they have trees. The trees are all over the city, and it made such a difference. They planted trees in areas that I would never, as a landscape designer, I would never even have thought of putting trees there. But the difference that it made was absolutely incredible. They've got a lot of buildings, but they've created some green space by planting trees in avenues, sometimes right next to buildings, big buildings, and the trees are surviving.
The definition of a boulevard is a tree-lined street. We have the Pine East-West Boulevard, but it doesn't have any trees. We need to put trees there so that we can really bring the name out. So as we drive, we see the beautiful trees that are there. So we cannot just say it's overseas and we see it and we enjoy it. We have to bring that home as well and say we want to have trees. We want to have these beautiful areas in our cities, in Bridgetown, we want to have it in Spikestown. We want to have the trees surrounding us, and we can enjoy the benefit of the trees. We can have flowering trees, we can have trees with plain leaves, and these, I'm sure, would add to the aesthetic value of the area and make us feel more pleasant.
Warrens is a burgeoning commercial center which started to develop after the construction of the airport to West Coast Highway in the 1980s. We missed an opportunity to develop Warrens with trees and not mere concrete. Every major commercial area requires an oasis, a space set aside for individuals to relax and recreate themselves. The time has come for serious consideration to be given to the establishment of such an area.
As we move along the highway to the Warrens area, we have a problem developing there now, it seems, where we have an incredible amount of hardscape being created. And it's a pity that in the recent developments around the dome that they did not find a way to incorporate additional trees. There are some palms, but they don't really provide shade. Trees are so important for shade in car parks and whatnot. If the right trees are chosen, they're safe.
When Warrens was redone, they planted trees all around Warrens. The new company that has taken over have taken every tree out, and now it's tarmac. And it really is sad. And it's so easy to plant some trees and just make the whole place look green.
Perhaps Massey could add a few trees to their area as well. We do have that lovely grove of mahogany trees by the CIBC building around the old historic Warrens Great House. They have been maintained by and large. That's a great start. Let's carry trees further west and keep the place green and cool. The Warrens area has a lot of potential for adding trees to it. We have the center strip between the two roundabouts heading towards what I call the Simpson roundabout, which just has small shrubs now. Trees could be placed in there. So I think we have a lot of potential to do better in the Warrens area.
With reference to Dr. Webster's suggestion, and in the absence of an architectural rendering, we have retrieved a few examples typical of Singapore and Paris. This is what Warren's center divider could possibly look like. Now, what about the highway?
When we're talking about the highway, we have many roundabouts along the highway, and some of them have been quite beautifully landscaped. However, some of them are really large enough that they could have trees in them, because if we look at some of the other roundabouts, they actually have palms growing in them. We've just seen 3 Bismarck palms placed in the Sir Garfield Sobers roundabout there by Sagicor. And there are several stands of palms at the roundabout, the Simpson Motors roundabout in Warrens. There is a palm planted in the center of the Norman Niles roundabout. It's a royal palm, and it's grown to a significant height now. It's quite beautiful. It adds to the landscape, and it does not in any way obstruct vision around the roundabout. It has been suggested by many people that planting palms is an obstruction around roundabouts. Frankly, I think many of the shrubs that are planted here are more of an obstruction than a palm or a tree. And there are several trees that could easily be planted in roundabouts that will add to the greening of the country and the beautification of the landscape.
Barney Gibbs has been playing his part in beautifying the highway with palms.
I started to work alongside the Beautify Barbados to plant trees along the ABC Highway. And it's probably one of the more visible projects that we've done, but there have been others as well. Yes, it started more or less by Chickmont Roundabout, and sort of worked our way back to Graham Hall. And then more recently, we've started going from the Emancipation Statue back to Warrens. But that's being done with the Future Trees, which is an arm of the Future Center Trust. And I work with them as a volunteer. But a lot of corporate Barbados and even individuals will sponsor, you know, a number of trees, the 10 trees, 1 tree. Sometimes someone will ask us to put in a tree for someone's birthday or as a memorial. So it's been going well.
So what we are saying is you have to make that effort. You make efforts in other areas of your life to improve yourself. You go to the gym, you go walking, you do all these things to keep yourself healthy. What about looking at pleasant areas? All of these things help you to see things differently and make it more relaxing. If you go somewhere and you can sit and you can see beautiful trees, beautiful plants, beautiful flowers, then it always makes you feel relaxed. You never feel like I'm gonna leave here and I'm gonna start a fight and I'm gonna beat someone. And I'm gonna have a quarrel. You just say, oh, I feel so relaxed. Then when you get in your car and you drive around and everybody's going fast and you say, oh. But for that time you were relaxed. So that's how you think about it. It's going to be a benefit for you. We are not doing sufficient on planting and replacing trees. Trees are being cut down every day. Trees are being destroyed every day, sometimes for frivolous reasons.
This continues to be a major concern on the island. Carla Daniel, in commenting on an incident that occurred in February 2015 at Whitehall in St. Peter, shares with us the advantages of proper pruning of trees as opposed to butchering.
There has been a systematic butchering of the trees lining this particular stretch of road. Now, this was brought to the public's attention by a gentleman who was concerned about the state of the trees after they had been indiscriminately cut earlier in February. Now, as you can see, many of the trees have been topped off with about 80 to 90% of the branches being removed. And this type, while we admit that some pruning may be necessary, what is required is a careful and considerate pruning to ensure the health of the tree, as opposed to a clear cutting of the top of the tree. When you clear cut trees like this, what often happens is that you get branching and the trees become top heavy, making the trees themselves a great deal weaker and making them more susceptible to damage in hurricanes or strong winds. Now, what is essential is that we have personnel who are trained in the proper pruning of trees that can come in and show exactly where the tree should be cut so that we will have the trees removed. We don't have issues with them growing along the power line. So any necessary cutting or trimming is done, but it is done in the best interest of maintaining the health of the plants.
Trees can always be saved. Where there's a will, there is a way. And if we take that attitude that where there's a will, there's a way to save trees and to have more trees, and when we cut down the tree, we say, okay, I'm gonna replace this tree that was here because this tree is part of my heritage. It was here before I was born. It was here before my mother was born, before my mother's mother was born, and I have to respect that so that young people would see trees are part of our heritage too. Trees are important to our lives and we have to keep adding trees all of the time.
This has been the constant theme and refrain throughout this series, pleading with all of us to do our part and ensure that trees are planted. We cannot overemphasize the importance of trees to our lives and the environment. It is about taking responsibility for what has been entrusted to us, keeping our environment clean and healthy, and taking pride in it. To illustrate this, Dr. Honychurch uses the example of an island with which we are often juxtapositioned.
In an island just a bit larger than Barbados, but not quite the size of St. Lucia, Singapore. Dropping any form of rubbish is a serious offense that is immediately punishable. Even the chewing of gum, is an illegal act. And here we will talk about Singapore, we'll admire the place and the country and what it has done for over 50 years of independence. And we don't seem to have that same perception. It's as if once you throw a piece of rubbish, out of sight, out of mind. It's interesting too that even archaeologists of the Caribbean history have shown that when they are studying small-scale villages in the past, people would clean their yard to the point of the boundary and leave all the rubbish at the edge of the boundary without actually thinking that it should be cleaned up. It's a long-standing attitude that seems to affect us all. And when you get on a national basis in a completely changed economy where there is so much more imports than before, if you had been to a Barbados of 50, 60 years ago, we were consuming far more biodegradable material. We were peeling yams, we were taking off the tops of eddos, and a lot of what we were using was biodegradable. And so it would rot, we'd give it to pigs, and it would disappear. But now we are importing vast amount of plastics, of wrapped food, and food that is in containers. And we just take those containers and we fling them around, not feeling that, you know, they should be put away properly and that they should be collected properly. So this is a great issue for small islands particularly. Small island nation states have this major problem of finding space. And we notice here in Barbados over the last few decades, the whole question of where the rubbish is dumped and how it is dumped and what is done with it and the method in which it is disposed becomes a very important topical and political issue. And because we are small and because we're consuming so much, this issue is going to be remaining on the front burner for many years to come.
And look after our country. Look after our country with where we put the garbage. Look after our gullies and treasure what we have. As readily as we walk up, the place would be a forest because we do walk up well. So I think perhaps think of trees and think of trees every morning when you wake up. And think of fruit trees and what you can eat from those fruit trees and how much less we'd have to import if some of them bear something to eat.
Nature does not need mankind. Mankind needs nature. I'm Sherwood McCaskie. Do join us next week at the same time when we bring this series to an end. Goodbye.